Hello and welcome to the first podcast of 2024 from Le Monde Diplomatique. My name's George Miller, and my guest today is Julien Brygo, who has a piece in this month's paper entitled South Carolina, Battle Lines Drawn for US Election. Before we get to the interview, just a quick reminder that all previous episodes of this podcast are on the website at mondediplo.com, and you can subscribe to it wherever you get your podcasts, so that you never miss another episode. Last autumn, Julien visited South Carolina to take the temperature of the state a year out from this November's election. He visited black Baptist churches and white Baptist churches, university campuses, and Moms for Liberty meetings. He spoke to Democratic activists and Republican candidates. Like the nation as a whole, the South Carolina he encountered was sharply polarized. To Democrats, Trump poses a real threat to democracy in America. To Republicans, Biden is intent on destroying American values. And, as I record this the day after the Iowa caucuses, in which Trump scored a record win, the 2024 election has moved a step closer to being a rematch between Biden and Trump. In our conversation, I asked Julien about how voters are looking on this prospect. But when we spoke on the 9th of January, I began by asking him how he chose South Carolina as the focus for his reporting.
Because South Carolina was the state which was quite, not a swing state, but decisive state in 2020. It's basically the place where Bernie Sanders kind of lost his momentum. He was quite high in the polls, and he had already won a couple of states, and then came South Carolina, and it's the state that kind of pushed Joe Biden toward the White House, and so it was such a decisive state that Joe Biden decided to organize the first primaries of the Democratic Party in South Carolina for 2024. It's a place that gathers a lot of contemporary issues and presidential race issues, especially the amount of Black voters. South Carolina is the sixth state in the U.S. concerning the proportion of Black voters. And it seems like every 4 years there is like this thing coming that the candidates are trying to convince the Black voters. So it's like it's more than 26% in South Carolina. So it's quite important. And so, for example, yesterday, as we talk, we are the 9th of January. Yesterday, Joe Biden was in Charleston in the first African-American church in Charleston, the place where there has been a massacre from a white supremacist, was it 8 years ago, I think? It's the church he decided to come, just like in 2020, to gather the Black community. And he was endorsed by Jim Clyburn, a very important civil rights activist, a very important person for the African American community. And so, yeah, the pictures of yesterday, Joe Biden in that church, it was like a copy and paste from the 2020 election. So, well, all those reasons, kind of the loss of Bernie Sanders, the rise of Joe Biden, the importance of the Black community votes. Well, all those reasons made us think that it would be a nice and interesting state to investigate.
And so it proved, I think. And I wondered, did you have a sort of list of the kinds of people that you really wanted to talk to in order to get a perspective on the issues of this election? Because you meet a wide variety of people in a wide variety of contexts from across the political spectrum, all sorts of different beliefs and priorities. So how did you decide how you were going to get that perspective?
When I documented myself on the South Carolina, I realized that it was a very religious state. So I was thinking that one of the places which would be important to understand how the political ideas kind of spread in the population, it would be the churches. And obviously the importance of the Black community made me think that it would be interesting to meet some Black pastors. Actually, I didn't have any contact when I went in South Carolina. I had one contact of one teacher in the Furman University, which happened to be a French literature teacher. So just went there to meet him, and kind of the doors kind of slowly by slowly they opened. I met his colleagues. I met many of his students, and it gave me quite interesting insight on the life on the campuses in America, which are like in the middle of routine controversies for decades, almost a decade. It was like the cancel culture. Now it seems to be the place where there is a lot of anti-Semite demonstration. They are talking about the students who are like demonstrating for the Palestinian people not to be killed massively. These are places, campuses are like quite strategic for the political position of United States, the way that the how the ideas are growing or not. So I started with this contact, and then I like an everyday reporter, just reading the news, seeing what's going on in the county, trying to understand how do people vote here and there. So I decided to go in Greenville, which is the fourth. It's like an industrial cradle in South Carolina. Lots of industries, they most of them they shut down the textile industry and paper industry. All of them were around, and of course textile industry was very important in South Carolina. As you might know, South Carolina and especially Charleston, almost half of the slaves, African slaves, went in the United States through Charleston. So this state is a very important is historically. I decided to go to see Charleston, which is kind of a Democratic Party base. It votes almost all the time for the Democrat Party, and so I wanted to match that kind of opposition, like really a red state, red county or town, and then blue county. So I just try to have a broad picture. I mean, it's usually, of course, going to see the Democrats and the Republicans. I couldn't really take the time to go see the independent candidates. There are some in my article. I don't really talk about them because it's true that the whole campaign is focused on this rematch, Biden versus Trump, which is very probably going to happen, but we don't know. There is a couple of months. There is like 8 or 10 months before the November elections.
I know we really don't know, as you say, but from the people you spoke to, do they have a very strong sense that it will be a rematch? And what do they feel about that? But I mean, I can imagine some people just feel, apathy or despair at the idea of a rematch, and others, I guess, depending on where you are in the political spectrum and what your hopes are,
Yeah.
might welcome the opportunity for Trump taking on Biden again. But what sort of sense did you get from the people you spoke to about the prospect of Biden versus Trump for a second time?
The first people I met actually at Furman University were kind of disgusted. Like the first natural reaction was so ugly, so disgusting, because both candidates, major candidates, they kind of fight each other through all kind of meanings, and their sons, their families are involved into trials and accusations. So it's like it's basically a big mess that people are just witnessing, like between Trump, which is basically facing 91 charges, four penal trials, and as we spoke, Connecticut, with Colorado and Maine just decided to take him off of the Republican primaries, which he is going to appeal at the Supreme Court. So, but since we know that the Supreme Court has been changed, it's like there is six strong Republican judges and three more Democrat judges. They have the majority at the Supreme Court, so we can expect that Donald Trump will be backed by the Supreme Court and will be able to compete and to be the nominee, the candidate for the GOP. But we don't really know at the moment. And people were like, of course, when I went to see the Democrat militants or people involved in the Democrat Party, their first reaction was, we will have to do with Joe Biden because there is nobody else at the moment. And most of them were talking to me about his age because this is something that is often talked about on the main media, how old he is. And he's 83 years old, and Donald Trump will be 78, I think, in November. Yeah, 78. So we don't hear such things about Trump. I heard mostly from from the Democrat people. Of course, most of them were talking about the 6th of January, the insurrection over the Capitol, and how dangerous Trump is for them. And when you ask question to the Republican militants, well, they are disgusted by Joe Biden. For them, it's the candidate of socialism, Marxism. So it's interesting how things are really polarized. Like Trump is the evil, and Joe Biden is considered like the evil. So it's very strong, this polarization. People say basically when they are Democrat or when they are Republican, they say, we don't have anything to discuss about anymore. This is what shocked me. The walls are very high now between the right and the left, between the Democrats and the Republicans, especially on the campus. Like people just, we don't have anything to say to a Trump supporter. And on the other side, we don't have anything to do with this corrupt Joe Biden. So yeah, it's very, very polarized.
As you say, it's seen in terms of good and evil, isn't it? It's really seen in those existential terms rather than a political disagreement and the possibility of discussion and progress through discussion. It's actually all conceived in these Manichaean terms of good and evil. It's not the case, though, that every Republican you met was an ardent Trump supporter. I mean, some of them are very reluctant to support Trump, but they see Trump as the likely nominee. And I wondered, what can you say about the challengers? There are several Republican challengers, but none of them seems to be cutting through in a really significant way. So you've got, on one hand, you've got Republicans who don't like Trump, who'd like to see the back of Trump, but none of these other challengers has been able to make a really significant impact. So I wondered how you saw that.
It was surprising because when we talk about, for example, Nikki Haley, she used to be governor of the South Carolina. She doesn't seem to have any support in South Carolina, which seems to be really a Trump state. But yeah, when we talk about Ron DeSantis, also well, he's the governor of Florida. He's quite known, quite popular. He's known. He has an audience, especially on those woke issues, what they called woke issues, like banning books and fighting what they call the LGBTQ lobby and also the Black Lives Matter lobby. For them, it's like the devil. There is officially 5 candidates for the race. So it's Donald Trump. I watched the polls today, this morning. He's still like almost over 50% of intentions of voting. And then comes Ronald DeSantis, almost at the same position than Nikki Haley. And then you have Chris Christie, which is the most anti-Trump candidate, former governor of New Hampshire. And then the last one is Vivek Ramaswamy. He's an entrepreneur. She's an entrepreneur whose ideology is also quite focused on those woke issues. Like he wrote many books about these issues. During the GOP television debates, he was very aggressive, especially against Nikki Haley. very aggressive, and well, he's the last one in the polls, almost the same position than Chris Christie, between 3 and 5%. So yeah, it's quite surprising that Nikki Haley, in her own state, doesn't have such a support. I don't really know how to analyze this. I asked the question to many of the Republican people. For example, Matthew Leber, which is a representative at the House of the Representatives in South Carolina, and well, his answer was, you can't trust her. She's always like betraying the people who support her. And he was maybe thinking about Donald Trump, who basically nominated her as US ambassador at the UN. And then she began to be very critical about Trump. So yeah, there was the last debate, all the candidates were against Nikki Haley, which I don't know, which seems to be helping her a little bit, but she's very far. And Ronald DeSantis also seems to be very far from Donald Trump. And there is this violence climate since 6th of January, since the attempt of insurrection, and since the Trump first term. This is what the Democratic militants explained me, that the hate groups are like rising in the US, and especially in the South, where there is a base for this ideology. It's not only the Proud Boys, it's many other hate groups that are really like white supremacist groups. And there's this fear, you can feel this fear. There is this fear that if anything happens to Donald Trump, if he can't, run for the presidency, this is something that you hear a lot, that there's going to be violence. There's going to be people marching, a lot of people marching and believing. I mean, lots of Trump supporters still honestly believe that Trump had won in 2020. So we don't really know what's going to happen if something happens to Donald Trump, if he's convicted, if he goes in jail, if he cannot play with his immunity. It depends who you ask the question to, but yeah, people are quite sure that it's going to be Biden versus Trump. Yeah.
And if they're seeing this election in existential terms of good versus evil, of Trump as a threat to democracy, or as Biden as the harbinger of socialism or Marxism, if they're seeing it in those terms, does that mean that sort of normal issues are really not on the agenda? Things like foreign policy or health spending or economic policy. I mean, are people so fixated in seeing things, in extreme terms as a battle between good and evil, that there isn't really space for what we might think of as a normal election debate? Is that being pushed to the side?
I can say that the Republican people I talked with, they are literally obsessed by the woke, the gay, the lesbian issues. This is like the thing that comes straight. They think that the public schools are the place where LGBTQ lobbies are trying to recruit some people, or to change the gender of the people. And this is what comes to their mind straight. And they believe that it's an attempt, and it's an assault over the American values, the American families, and it's related to religion. And when you ask to the Democrats, they kind of always go back to the what they call the kitchen table issues: the economy, the inflation, the oil prices, the interest rates. And they are more like on the ordinary subject and issues of the Democratic Party. So, but concerning the foreign policy, it's very possible that it's still going to have a place, I think, in the race, because there's two major subjects. First one is, of course, Israel and Gaza. You saw all the images, I guess, all over America. There is a lot of protest, people asking for a ceasefire. in the campuses, not only in the campuses in New York City, mainly in the big cities. So there is something. And Joe Biden, for example, yesterday he was at Charleston at the church, and his meeting was some activists came and started to shout for a ceasefire in Gaza, and he answered to them, "I understand your passion, but I'm trying my best." So I guess for many Democratic voters, this issue of Gaza will be quite important. I don't know how important it's going to be because many people in America, Republicans or Democrats, they believe that Israel is just defending themselves and they are just doing what they should do, even though they are doing a huge massacre in Gaza. And if you say so, you're threatened and you're qualified as as an anti-Semite. During my report, I met the president of the Democratic Party in a small country, rural county, Anderson County. Very interesting, really like a red state, like full Republican. He just resigned, like when I came there beginning of November. He had just resigned from the chair of the Democratic Party because of Joe Biden refusing to call for a ceasefire and basically backing Netanyahu's government. So I guess for some people it's going to be important. The other issue is Ukraine. Are there going to be as much support, giving them guns and giving them means of defending themselves? This is quite interesting. For example, Vivek Ramaswamy, for example, he said that we have to stop giving money to Ukraine, but also to Israel, which is quite new. Hearing a right-wing American politician saying that Israel doesn't need our money, our guns, it's quite new. So that's interesting. Maybe something is going to move. And as you know, Trump is also known for being like America first, America first. So he's basically wanting to withdraw the most he can and to focus on America and get out of all the conflicts. So I guess it's going to be an issue, I think.
I wanted to end, Julien, just by asking you, what things will you be paying particular attention to in the months to come? What things do you think are really significant? We've talked about some of the issues that are in play, but what will you be particularly following when you look at what's going on in America over the course of this year?
Yeah, there's going to be quite a lot. Actually, the 15th in a week, it's the caucus of Iowa. I think in 2 weeks, the Supreme Court starts to study the appeal of the Republican Party concerning Colorado and Maine. So that's going to be something. And then I think the first primaries will be in New Hampshire because even though Joe Biden asked for South Carolina to be the first one, New Hampshire responded that they have been organizing the primaries, the first primaries since 123 years. So they were not ready to let South Carolina have all the light. So we're gonna have the New Hampshire primaries, and then beginning of February the South Carolina, and then the beginning of March, the 5th of March is the Super Tuesday. So we're gonna have everything's going to be a little bit more clear, I guess. But there is still this, I would say, the health issue concerning Joe Biden. We don't know if he's going to be healthy till November. So, and there's going to be actually primaries for the Democratic Party, but we don't really know the opponent. It's Dean Phillips, a rep from Minnesota, and Marianne Williamson. She seems to be a writer. We don't know. I don't know her, but there's going to be primaries. Like it's more like a formality. So I'm gonna follow this. I think the last debate, GOP debate, is 18th of January. So that's gonna be worth the watch. And yeah, the whole year will be like a Netflix series. Like I guess there is going to be many news, many events, many court decisions, many appeals, because Donald Trump is basically going to appeal every decision to win time. And is he going to be able to win time, to win enough time? We don't really know, and that's what makes this election quite unique. Yeah. In my report, the woke issues were quite like always popping up. As you read, I met with the Moms for Liberty group, and this book banning in the U.S. last year, over 3,000 books were taken off of the schools and the public libraries. So all over the United States, there is this panic, this moral panic that the school wouldn't be a safe place anymore. And so I guess those issues will also rise. We don't know where it's going to end, because it's more and more aggressive. Like Donald Trump is really like talking about vermin when he talks about the left. Joe Biden talks about Nazis when he talks about the right. And so we have this very nice atmosphere and this very conflictual. How is it going to evolve? I guess nobody is going to say, okay, let's go back to a certain decency. I don't know.
I was speaking to Julien Brygo, whose article in this month's paper is entitled South Carolina, Battle Lines Drawn for US Election. You can read it at mondediplo.com. If you're a subscriber, you can also read every edition of the paper going back over 25 years and online exclusive content. And if you're not yet a subscriber, there's plenty of open access content online to entice you to become one, including the full archive of this podcast. You'll find all previous episodes on our website, and you can also subscribe on your favourite podcast app. In the words of John Berger, why read LMD? To make sense of what's happening in the world behind the misinformation. I'll be back again soon with another interview with one of our contributors. So until then, thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.